All right. Good morning. I'm going to call the Cuyahoga County Equity Commission meeting to order for January 20th, 2022. The time is 10:04. My name is David Merriman. I am the chair. We'll begin with a roll call on behalf of the Department of the Office of Human Resources. Shiva Marshall.
Present.
On behalf of the Department of Equity and Inclusion.
Present.
Lenore Lockett, and then on behalf of the Department of Development, Vaughn?
Present.
All right, and it's Vaughn Johnson, right?
That's
Okay,
correct.
Sorry. And so we have a quorum. There are a few staff members that are unavailable today, but we're going to move forward given we have a full agenda to review and to go through. I'd like to begin with the review and approval of the minutes. The minutes were posted and are available. Did anyone have any questions or any amendments to the minutes? All right, hearing none, a motion to approve?
A second.
I guess I will motion. Vaughn seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Public comment, there is no one here today from the public, and I don't know if we've received any other form of comment. So we'll move on to opening remarks from the Equity Commission members. Turn to my left. Lenora, anything that you would like to begin with?
Just state that I'm excited about 2022, the new year. Most of the items that I would bring or speak to are on the agenda, so I'll just hold my comments until those topics. Thank you.
Shiva, any opening remarks to share?
Just to say that I'm excited about this new year that's ahead of us. I look forward to what we're going to be contributing to the diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda and initiatives this year.
Thank you. For the Department of Health and Human Services, I've been talking with Dr. Leon Harris and Sabrina Roberts. They're very excited about the report that was produced, reviewed it with our leadership team, and I think we're all anticipating the finalization of that report and to share it and to have discussion. That's later on the agenda as well, but I think our staff are excited to see the year close and for us to have a great year ahead of us. Vaughn, anything to share from development?
I do. I'm really excited about 2022 and some of the things we did in 2021 that's carried over, and some initiatives that are kind of underway. So we actually sent out 1,000 letters in the central neighborhood in Cleveland directed towards those small businesses, minority-owned businesses, to engage them in workforce development. Also, there's a presence with Skill Up in that letter, and we've already received some feedback from those letters and engaging some of those businesses in that area. And these next two I'm really excited about. We're in the beginning stages of a collaboration with Destination Cleveland to bring two significant minority-focused conferences to Cleveland. One of them is the African American Credit Union Coalition. The other one is the National Federation of Community Development Credit Unions. And I believe the National Federation was planning to come to Cleveland already prior to the pandemic, and they put that on hold. I've had preliminary discussions with their leadership, as well as with the AACUC leadership, their board members, and they're really excited about doing something in the city of Cleveland. There's also a mentorship part of this engagement that will reach out to historically black universities, colleges and universities like Central State, Wilberforce right here in Ohio. I've started some preliminary discussions with some credit union executives that are interested in establishing branch locations in East Cleveland, as well as Central Neighborhood, specifically Arbor Park. And we're really excited about that because they are actually ready to move forward. So we've been in some preliminary discussions with the folks at East Cleveland and Arbor Park as well. I believe that might be on the agenda a little bit later too. And of course, we continue our work with working with Director Lockett. I know she and I discussed some joint staff meetings where our teams would participate in each other's department staff meetings to get a better understanding of what we do and how we do it. We've established a workshop partnership with the Minority Business Assistance Center to be part of those those virtual workshops to present what we do at the county and Skill Up and other things like that, directed specifically at MBEs and other businesses like that. And then, of course, we have continued our internal work in supporting equity, and what we'd like to do is continue to do that internally, but also engage senior leadership in other departments and not just frontline staff, so that the equity portion of it is being led by the leadership in those departments. So those are some of the things that we've been up to, and I'm really excited about that and how that's going to play out in 2022.
That's great updates, Vaughn. Can I ask, are there, the conferences you referenced, are those intended for in-person
Yes,
physical conferences?
they are.
Great.
They're in person. I think the earliest date we're looking at is maybe 2024.
Okay,
2023 is taken. 2024 is available to us. So we're going to
Great.
push for that.
that's wonderful. I think it's wonderful to have some targets and for us to be really, tracking out and probably, hopefully managing COVID as well.
Mhm.
Are there any questions for Vaughn, or do any commission members have questions for each other? Great. Well, as I said, we have a very full agenda today, so I think I'll move forward and I'll invite one of our first presenters to share with us more information on the employee sponsorship program. We're joined today by Awatef Assad from the County Law Department. Ms. Assad is a lawyer that has worked with, I think, probably all of us at one point or another, and I think we're really thrilled to see this proposed program presented today. So, Awatef, if you could please just begin your presentation. I understand you'll be asking us to advance the slides, and so we'll turn it over to you.
All right. I don't see the slideshow.
It is up on our side, so let's see if we are seeing it. We got to share on our
Yeah,
side.
Jonathan was,
All right, it's coming.
yeah. Well, first of all, good morning, Happy New Year, and thank you all for your efforts and work in advancing equity and inclusion with the county. For those who don't know me, I am Awatef Assad. I'm the risk manager for Cuyahoga County, and I also serve as the vice president of inclusion and diversity for the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss a possible countywide employee sponsorship program. Equity, inclusion, and I apologize, I'm looking over here because I have two computers. Equity, inclusion, and diversity ideals are a matter of fundamental fairness and opportunity. Equity and inclusion are important to building public confidence and trust. An employee sponsorship program is a key to help leveling the playing field. So I will begin my discussion right now. The first slide. So according to the Harvard Business Review, there is a growing body of evidence that the current diversity programs don't work. There's a study that showed that women in the workforce, even though they are 50% of the make up 50% of the workforce, they are only hold 24% of senior management roles, and 3% of the Fortune 500 CEOs. Actually, the percentage of underrepresented minorities is even lower. So we look at best practices. Diversity and inclusion programs currently do not actively facilitate leadership and promotion pathways. Why? Because obviously you all know about affinity and unconscious biases. According to the McKinsey report, there is a strong business case for inclusion and equity based on data. This is based on data analytics. Leadership is key. I do want to say that it is truly extraordinary that even the Securities and Exchange Commission has recently adopted a rule requiring NASDAQ listed companies to have diverse board representation. that being at least one female and at least one director must self-identify and as underrepresented minority and LGBTQ+. So it really is extraordinary that the SEC acknowledges the importance of underrepresented employees to hold senior level positions. So, next slide. Again, sponsorship is key. Sponsorship is how we build a more equitable, inclusive workplace. Sponsorship is not mentorship. It may include mentorship, but it is more action-oriented and includes a sponsor who is advocating on behalf of diverse employees. To hold leadership positions, it is truly a driver of real change. According to the Harvard Business Review, it is a valuable tool. And according to the culture at work, it's defined as a strategic professional relationship forged between an ambitious high performer, protege or sponsee, and a more senior executive sponsor or steward, which leads to a positive career traction for both. It will lead to equal representation in top-level leadership positions. It truly will help with retention and create a high talent pipeline. Next slide. What are sponsors? Who are the sponsors? Because again, I think this is a novel concept for a lot of folks because we think of mentorship, but not sponsorship. A sponsor it drives career advancement, personal development, and has impact more than mentors because they advocate and have a stake in an underrepresented employee's success. They hold senior level positions who identify or are assigned to proteges. They help the sponsee develop a stronger voice and influence within the company. They increase and promote visibility for their sponsees. They share valuable insight. Sponsors make meaningful introductions and connections to senior leaders, and they advocate for the next opportunity or promotion on behalf of their sponsee. Next slide. Sponsee protege is a high potential employee or professional, high achiever and performer. The sponsorship will enable a protege with career advancement and increase their objective career outcomes. Next slide. What are the advantages? It is important that there is a well-structured sponsorship program. It will help drive the team's overall chances of success. It will help the department improve performance. It will create strong teaching environments. It will contribute to overall productivity and happiness in the business. And it will produce better business outcomes. According to some study, it might be Harvard Business Review, Fortune 500 companies with the highest representation of women on their boards financially outperformed those with the fewest. Some business outcomes would include better business outcomes, better financial results, innovation, decision-making, retention, and job satisfaction. And of course, it will address implicit and affinity biases. Next slide.
Sorry.
So the critical components, like I said, is it's really critical and important to build a formal structure and framework and to get buy-in and support from the organization's senior leadership. Next slide. Implementation. I recommend possibly to implement on maybe a small pilot program, and that would kind of create the groundwork for a more formal sponsorship program. We could pool potential candidates from a leadership academy that I understand Lenora may be heading or leading, or from the Innovation Academy. Next slide. So this is absolutely critical of a matchmaking process. We need to create selection criteria for diverse candidates. We need to prioritize sponsors for underrepresented groups. We should create an opt-in type sponsorship program. And also it's important to create actionable goals to improve leadership potential and increase promotions. Also setting a schedule for expectations, having regular meetings. And also there should be training the sponsor and the sponsee and a code of conduct. Next slide. There should, with any program, there should be metrics to measure the success of the program. I would recommend to the commission, maybe starting off with a one-year program, having quarterly check-ins or meetings, and also measuring the progress at the conclusion of the year. For example, we'll look to see, were there any new roles and assignments created for the sponsee? Did it result in promotions? Did the sponsee have more weight in company discussions and influence in their field? Also, I did some research, and these are the companies that have a formal sponsorship program. So if the county would like to pursue this, we could probably secure some templates from these organizations. So that's all I have for you. If you have any questions, let me know.
So first, I do want to thank you, Mrs. Saad, for a very thoughtful presentation and introducing what is seems like a practice that's being used in our country and has been shown to have value. I'm going to ask, before I ask my questions, I'm going to ask Sheba Marshall if she'd like to kick us off with any questions as the Interim Director of Human Resources. I think this sort of fits somewhere within the work that her team does. And and I understand from her experience working at Kent State University and other environments, she's has a great exposure beyond the county. So, Sheba, I'd like to just turn it to you to see if you have any questions to kick us off.
Thank you. Actually, I do. I appreciate that. So my first question, as you were going through this, was how does this work with succession planning programs? So I've actually been a part of a leadership development institute, and where it wasn't targeted toward diverse candidates, it was just a leadership institute, and I've been to one. But how do you see this fitting in with a typical organization succession planning program?
So thank you, Sheba, for that question. I think they could complement. I think it could be included, maybe covered under the succession planning, or it could be a standalone program. But I leave it up to you. But I think that's great to like I said, it would complement the program you're describing.
How would you sort of talk about introducing such a program? Because when you talk about these initiatives, you want to make sure it's inclusive, but that it targets the audience that you're looking to. So what have you seen in your research?
So honestly, this is how this came up. I am, a volunteer for the Bar Association, and and especially I'm also the co-chair of the Women in the Law, and I had read about this, and so I presented it to the CMBA and wanting to, come up with a program for women in the law, and they kind of took it over, and they're doing it CMBA wide for everybody.
Okay.
So they want to include everyone in this. So, I mean, I don't have, to be frank with you, this is based on my research. I don't have more to share with you. I can definitely work with you and we can hash that out.
Yeah.
But I think where your question lies is that there are a lot of people deserving of this program that would benefit for sponsorship. And certainly we would want to reach out to all those and involve them, and certainly open the program for all of them. But at its core, This is about building a future, and we all need to commit to the idea that we have an additional role to play in sponsoring and guiding our future leaders. So I think, I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah.
we would open it up to all, but our focus would be underrepresented employees.
Gotcha.
Let me ask, if I can, to
Oh,
move on.
absolutely.
I'm going to ask Director Lockett if she'd like to provide any feedback, and you know, I want to make time for each commission member to present. We do have a full agenda, so I want to limit questions because I think we'll have follow-up discussion and action on this.
Right. Thank you, David. So Wativ approached me a couple of months ago, and I was very excited about the opportunity to investigate how we can potentially determine how to include this in our equity initiatives. And as you all brought up, there's a couple of things. We don't want an inclusive program that makes people feel unincluded, a large part. But we want to make it sure that there's an opportunity to make sure that the demographics are reflective of being diverse. And coming from the background as a procurement, where you have race and gender neutral, where there are initiatives that you can put in place that, based on best practices of being inclusive and equitable, will forge that demographics that are representative of various areas. So one of the things is what to mention, one of the things that I discussed before Marisha Daniels and Communications left was that we wanted to do a leadership training, which in ways align with succession planning about how do we make sure that people in the county we hire, now how do we retain and promote to make sure we get that educational and experience benefit and that it's diverse. And part of that is providing that training cross-board so that there is skills are transferable in different areas. So unfortunately, I'm a small department. I like to hire and retain people in my department, but there may not be necessarily a full wealth of opportunities because of the size of my department. But that doesn't mean that talent cannot benefit the county as a whole by providing opportunities in other areas. So again, I'm looking at the leadership as one pool to provide a way to nurture talent within the county. And then from that pool, there can be a sponsorship program that is aligned with that can further provide that avenue for promotion. And again, we're at the point where we're developing it. We have some potentially develop it, look at what other entities are doing, look at what our goals, and we can start trying to develop a program. Also, I would say continuous improvement. Not saying you start off with a program that's haphazard. You start off with the best information you have now, and as 1 year, you continue to revisit, not only looking at the people in the county, the upper management, what are some of the areas that they feel like for succession planning that we would benefit. Maybe talk to the people who have gone through the leadership program to find out what are things that can be improved there as a part of continuous improvement, and also looking to see if it is inclusive and if the promotions and level of ascension is demographically diverse.
So I think those are critical points. I think we're leading to some action items, but what I'd like to do before I ask a question, I want to see if Vaughn has anything that he'd want to include. Again, I think we need to be mindful of time. We do have several other items on the agenda, but want to invite Vaughn to also comment.
I'll try and be brief. First of all, I'm familiar with the McKinsey report, and the industry that I spent many years of my career in, the credit union banking industry. There has been a lack of diversity and inclusion in that industry. I believe out of the 8,000 or so credit unions across the country, only about 5 or 6% of those are led by people of color. So the African American Credit Union Coalition, which I alluded to earlier, they created a mentorship program for succession planning, leadership training, to create a pipeline of individuals that are ready to enter the industry and then also take over in leadership positions. And this has been going on for at least 20 years. So I've seen some outcomes from that. And many of the current executives of color in that industry have gone through that leadership training. So I've seen that. I know that something like that has merit to it. And I'm excited to see where this could actually go.
Wonderful. So if I could close by just a comment and then a question. So timing on this is wonderful. We spoke, I spoke yesterday with Lindy Burt when I was completing our continuity of operation plan. I called Lindy because one of the sections in the continuity of operation plan talks about succession, not succession planning, coverage. Coverage, right? And so what happens when somebody goes out and they're ill, or if they're indisposed, you have to have some form of succession in place, and there has to be a clear sense of who should step into those roles. And some part of what I was wondering is, how as an organization do we document who we would tap as the person in a public record and have that be viewed as being a decision that one could make sense with limited information, but also fits within a civil service environment and where there is testing and access to positions across the board. And I think there's some conflict there. I think we have to recognize there is subject content expertise. There's real serious programmatic knowledge that's needed for a lot of these programs, and only so many people have it, but also that probably funnels and candidates. And where I left it with Lindy is she said, think about the staff that are in your organization or in those departments that would have it, and you really focus on the staff position, not the individual. But it really does raise this question about how we can do this work in an environment where we have civil service, where there is testing, and there should be open access to applying for a position. But there is also this competing priority to develop talent, to break through past barriers. So Watef, here's my only question is, you've done a lot of great work on this. Would you be willing to make this similar presentation to our work group? Our structure is we try to get the input of our work group before we charge forward with the new projects. We now meet every other month as the Equity Commission, and then the off months the working group meets. And so I thought maybe this would make sense as something that is presented to the work group, get their feedback, because I would love their input as well, because they also present many wonderful perspectives and are working on a lot of the same themes and issues at a different level. Lenore, does that make sense? Referring this to the work group?
Yes, I think would be good. The working group, a lot if they meet on it's an informal group, but we meet remotely, and that's the team that actually will delve into how do we start forming this program. Not necessarily, and that would be what I would envision would be the working group to help develop. Like I mentioned, Marisha was part of the working group when she was with the county, and working with her on the communication plan. That's when we talked about developing a leadership program and having input on that. So that would be, we meet on I think the next meeting is the February 2nd.
Okay.
It's the first.
So Watef, I understand you may not have your schedule in front of you. If we will provide you the dates when the working group is, I'd ask you to consider coming forward and making a presentation. I think if you're unavailable, we could always ask the working group members, many of whom are viewing this presentation right now, but they could also review the content, but they might have questions that we've not had time to talk through. So I'd ask if you'd consider that, and if the schedule works and the time works for you, to consider providing us yet one more slug of your time.
Absolutely. I'm
Wonderful.
willing to do that, to present to the working group. Thank you.
On behalf of the Equity Commission, thank you very much for bringing this idea forward. I'm really looking forward to hearing how this will be developed, and hope that we can get some presentation on it at our next meeting. So unless there are other questions for Ms. Sorry, go on. Okay.
No, it's fine.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much, Ms. Assad.
I was just
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I'm going to move us on to the next item on the agenda, which is a report on the race equity training. Lenore, are you reporting that, or is that coming from
Yes.
Shiva? Okay.
I'll provide, obviously. Lenore Lockett, Department of Equity and Inclusion. One of the projects that has been that was initiated last year by the General Equity Commission and it was related to recommendation from both CASE and the Equity Commission's report that was issued in January of 2021, was that we needed to have racial equity and inclusion training for Cuyahoga County staff and leadership. There was an RFP issued. There were 3 proposals submitted in April of last year. There was an initial review done by a team to have representation from various county departments and also representation from CASE. Then the next step was interviews that was done by a smaller group that included representation from the HR, clerk of courts, Clerk Byrd, as you know, Clerk Byrd is the liaison for CASE and DEI. There was the selection process. The recommended vendor is Tri-C. We went through a negotiation process to finalize the contract, and on January 10th, that contract was approved by the Board of Control.
Wonderful.
So we're excited. We have HR and DEI are serving as the leads on the county side. They have a team on their side. We've set up regular meetings to handle the administration of this project. In general, the overall scope is will be training the 4,500 employees that are under the direct supervision of the county executive, and also the 700 leaders and managers. So we took supervisors and above for the management training. And then there's a smaller group of 32 top-level executive leadership that will be provided additional coaching, executive training throughout the process. Because the process is it's a top-down process, is leading and pushing the importance of the equity training. The first phase will be the stakeholder analysis, which I will come back to, but then management will be trained first, because again, we're supposed to champion and review how this can be embedded in our operations. We don't want someone to take a class and then they forget about it. We want the management to have the training and know what their staff is going to be trained on, and also have skills on how to embed those tools and knowledge in their operations. So before we begin the management training, we didn't want a cookie cutter training that was done for any entity. So the first part of this process is the stakeholders analysis. So I know everyone's like, well, when are we going to see the training? Well, how we're setting ourselves up success is to make an investment in the stakeholders analysis. And part of that stakeholders analysis is the plan is to have focus groups. They're looking at 5 focus groups with team members, up to 10 on each group. So we're going to be requesting each of the Equity Commission members as we try to get this list together. We're also going to ask for representation from CASE or other stakeholders that are applicable to how DEI is done at the county or equity initiatives to have input in the focus groups. As part of that focus group, it will be led by the team on Tri-C side to try to figure out if there are some unique issues or some unique areas in the county, current events or programs, policies, what are our histories, where do we feel our gaps in equity, so that they can emphasize and specifically address those as part of the training for the county. So while it may not have, I remember we talked, David, a while back, but sometimes work is being done, as we said, the iceberg.
Yep.
We have the contract in January. People won't actually probably go to training until May, but setting up the project for success is very key. And that's what's going to occur between February and March. And the coaching and the actual impact on management will start in early May.
Well, congratulations on seeing the process through. I understand the work begins now. As much work went into getting the procurement out, having it closed, having it selected, getting a contract negotiated, and then getting a contract through what ultimately turns out to be the second Board of Control agenda on the year. So that's great news. It's wonderful progress. Just curious, is there communication to staff and the public about this as a change? Because I think it's an important change.
That's part of the communication plan. That's part
Okay.
of, once we do the focus group, that's one of the things that they focus, we meet on Mondays, is the communication plan. How do we start, again, part of advertising or marketing that
Okay.
this is coming and get people engaged? Because there's a couple of hurdles that we obviously, when you're trying to train 4,500 in the midst of a pandemic, you also have to look at operations. We're dealing with employee shortages, certain agreements. Obviously, while most staff who are office staff can allocate a portion of their time to do the training. However, there's certain county employees that when they're on duty, they're not looking at a computer.
Yep.
They're actually on duty, so they're gonna need to do that component in additional off time, or for which obviously we will compensate in accordance with our union agreements and HR requirements. Also, there's the uniqueness of the pandemic, so if they don't have computers, how do we manage that? So there's gonna need to be a lot of communication, and that might be, again, as part of that, that's why the discussion, equity commission objectives, there's a lot, how do we wanna feed this through? We're the equity commission, we're obviously the entities responsible for pushing the equity initiatives through, so we wanna all stay engaged, but we're all each individually running
Mhm.
organizations that have operational requirements and dealing with the issues that I'm speaking of in general operationally, not just as far as getting them with equity training.
I think my recommendation would just be to, continue to work with communications. I know that in losing Marisha, that was one person from that group that was very directly involved. I'm not clear how her role has been replaced. I do think this is exciting, and staff may not understand the amount of work that it took to get to this point, but, I still think it would be worthwhile sharing with them either an in the know statement from Armand or something that really speaks to this resource is not live. I mean, we're under contract. We are beginning the process. We are planning. Change is in play, and it took a long time to get to this point, but we're at it, and we're now working on it. So that would be my recommendation. Are there questions for Lenora?
And Sheba's involved. We have team, but yes, I don't know if you want to add comments. Sorry.
I don't want to add a comment. I just want to thank you for how you transitioned and jumped right in there, and a year later, here we are on this wonderful path of starting this program. So congratulations to you.
Thank
Kudos
you, a
to
team.
you.
Thank
Proud
you.
of you. So I just wanted to add that.
I really look forward to seeing this kicked off and participating and having my leadership team. It should go without saying, but please don't hesitate to let us know how we can support this. Any opportunity for us to be at the front of it is something that we're always interested in. And I understand we tend to have resources that other departments don't between our professional development office, and we do have some ability to lend weight to some initiatives. And if there's something that we can do, just ask. I'm going to move us on. Our next agenda item is the Equity Commission objectives.
So again, when we were, as part of the process of preparing the report, we felt that obviously the Equity Commission should start having discussions. We were busy last year dealing with transitions, trying to implement a new department, get legislation for Juneteenth. A lot of moving parts were occurring. And as a body, we're still a central component of pushing equity through the county. And I felt that we probably could start having discussions about overarching programs that we want to proceed, with which we want to proceed. And for instance, with the direction that we got today on the sponsorship, sending that to our support group, the working group, to say, hey, look into how we can do sponsorship program, if that is applicable, with how we can advance equity in our upper leadership. Also, one of the items that's always been on the table, well, in the background, is how do we have the 5 pilots and 1 board, how do we move the full tranche of departments onto the same path of looking at their operations and providing equity, improving equity in our county operations. We've been doing the 5 pilots 2 years now. How do we start? Now we're going to have the training this year. This might be the opportunity, once we bring everyone up as far as terminology, the why for diversity and inclusion, some of our efforts. This might be the opportunity we as a board say now all county agencies under the authority of the county executive should be ready to start embedding equity and inclusion intentionally. Obviously, as the county, we're supporting a lot of the vulnerable in our mission in many areas, and doing statutory responsible requirements. But how do we make sure that we're doing it via that equity lens? So looking us as a group, starting those discussions. on how.
I think it's a great observation. I will acknowledge that I actually didn't track that we're still at the 5-agency pilot stage, and I'm glad that we're talking about how we include the body of the county. You know, the other departments, I think I'm sure their staff want to also participate. And this is probably as much as inviting them and asking them their ideas as it is sort of establishing expectations and
Right.
the plans. So, Lenora, do you see this as something that is, these equity commission objectives are developed by us around the table, or is this something developed with a work group or through CASE? How do you think we kind of like document these and get these sort of in draft stage?
I think it's a mix of both in that we're the ones that ultimately say yes or yay or nay as far as a group, what are we putting on the to-do list for equity? Obviously, each department still has their director that has to look through their mission and things of that sort. So there's still that responsibility, and CASE is still going to do theirs.
Yeah.
But we need to be searching if there were reports that we felt and their reports that we felt are things that were internally focused that we can address and we felt were overarching. For instance, I believe like the equity training. First of all, that's to me would be one of the biggest things for us to push to make sure that we have a high success rate, even though it may be led with HR and DEI as the orchestrators or the project leads on the county side. It has to be pushed by us as important for all. Similarly with the leadership and succession planning. Again, our HR is, and there's PRC, and there's various components that overlap, but how can we give structure to what we're looking to see as far as equity as that goes? For DEI's part, I know one of the things that I wanted to do that was part of impacts the department was looking at a DEI scorecard. And that scorecard will kind of be and again, I see it as a continual improvement. So maybe this year's scorecard deals with 3 areas that I'm looking at in general for our equity is supplier diversity, workforce diversity, and policy and programs. Obviously, we can't attack the whole world of equity in 1 year, but we can have priorities, and the DEI scorecard with guidance from the Equity Commission can help say what are we in unison working on this year. We want to make sure that we try to evaluate make sure for example, would be making sure our forecast is up to date, making sure for workforce that we work with HR to make sure there's experiential equivalence in all of our postings. Make sure that when we advertise for certain positions that we maybe, if there are certain areas or HBCUs or different newspapers, things of that sort. As far as policies and programs, we can push as part of that scorecard where we talk to departments about, look at your program that maybe impacts 50% of your budget. Evaluate that program for equity and inclusion that impacts and burdens. We know you can't look at every program, but can you start looking at the programs that have a larger impact? So again, not make it overwhelming, and then maybe next year's scorecard is about increasing this, or maybe looking at the next level of programming. Maybe it looks at how do we assign duties to make sure that if you got 10 contract compliance officers, are they all getting opportunities with special projects? I remember hearing a case at one point in one department where they talked about an employee that knew where their boss ate lunch or dinner on the weekend. So they had opportunities to talk to their boss.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then they ended up getting a lot of the very unique projects, whereas everyone else was left with the run-of-the-mill projects.
Yeah.
But this person had advanced, not in ill intent or but how can we make sure that as a supervisor and manager, when the special projects, the high-level projects, are opportunities of higher visibility are given, how do we make sure that those are given out equitably?
So want to make sure we include also, so what I'm hearing is that we are going to be talking amongst ourselves to determine what we feel are objectives. We'll also be getting feedback from the work group. I think that makes sense. I think that's part of our charge to them, to provide us not just feedback, but ideas. Want to open it up. Vaughn, any questions on objectives or any suggestions?
No,
That's right. Sheba, anything to add on this?
No, I agree. Lenore and I actually talked about that communications piece and how critical it is to get it out to the leadership. But I think I like even more your suggestion where maybe we get the information out, even about the focus groups. Hey, this is real now. This is what's coming up. While you might not be involved now, look to the future. You will definitely be engaged. So, yeah.
Well, on that point about leadership, I think we're given a great opportunity to set an agenda for the future, stating the obvious that County Executive Aaron Budish has been extremely engaged on this. He's been very active. He's been a champion. He's also made the decision to step aside at the end of the year. So this year presents an opportunity for us to chart the work we've done and make proposals about what's to follow, and have a very clear sort of option for the next county executive in terms of how they approach these critical issues. So really, I think this is a great item. Lenore, let's connect offline and figure out how we put pen to paper to gather these possible objectives for us to then start to propose what a prioritized list would look like. Unless there's other discussion on this, I'm going to move us on to discussion of the equity report, which I think will in some ways tie to this.
Right. So we're, thank you, David. We're rounding third. County code requirements have a distribution of January 31st. So we have a little bit over about 7 business days. One of the things when we work with Tyler Sinclair, I want to thank Communications. He's been working very hard on the report. One of the things that we're trying to do is set us up for next year. So we work with Tyler, and we're looking at a format where, and with the envisioning that as new departments are added into the fold, there's a structure where as each entity discusses their equity work for the year, they discuss their mission in general. So there's awareness from the public reading the report on what exactly that department does. It's not going to get too much into details, but at least gives an overview. So at least there's an idea on where their breadth of work is. So how would their breadth of work be impacted by their equity initiative? Where would their focus be? And then looking at if they made commitments the last year, how do we have a standard way of providing a document and what our work has been in trying to fulfill those missions, and then discuss what we're doing next year. So again, we're looking for feedback. We gave the report out to the pilot agencies and a one board. As I stated, this is continuous improvement. So we're gonna our goal is to meet the deadline this year, but that doesn't mean that it's set in stone that that's exactly what it's gonna look like next year. It's always about reassess, improve, modify, but at the same time still provide some structure, but retain the uniqueness of the mission for each area. So we're looking at this next week, fine tuning the report, getting the review of the people who understand how to speak to the public and the community. As you know, I have an engineering background, and there's a lot of acronyms and legalese that doesn't necessarily reach or has the impact on the public. So we're definitely happy to have communications input on how to make sure that what we're saying has an audience, a clarity for the audience, the general audience.
So just to confirm, all departments have their content in, all the content is being reviewed by communications. We're sort of in draft iteration.
Right.
And seems like by this time next week, we'll be in a position to have a finalized draft.
Yes.
And should be able to meet the objective of January 31st.
Correct.
Right. Are questions for Lenore on the equity report? Yeah. And our comms team, the DHHS comms team, is also, again, an asset, a resource. So if at any point you want extra eyes on it, someone who maybe hasn't directly worked on it to just do
Okay.
some view and
Right.
to see if things make sense for content. I understand that when we get into multiple drafts and iterations, you get so comfortable with it that you might miss things. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us to let us know what we can do to support completing this really annual expectation. But for me, it is a chance to look back at the year
Right.
and look forward as you described it.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the equity report? Hearing none, I'm going to move us to our last item, which is closing remarks. I think I started on my left on this time. This time I'll start on my right. Vaughn, anything to add? Great. Sheba?
I just follow those same comments.
Lenore?
Yes, similarly, I'm excited about what we've done. We've come a long way. I believe we're setting a good foundation, and I'm ready to keep working and seeing the trajectory where we're going to reach.
Well, so I'd just like to close by recognizing it. I think we are at a great point where we are right now. I think back a year ago and how this commission was operating. I think back 2 years ago and how it wasn't operating, and how much growth we've had during that period. It really is pretty significant. No, the expectations were there all along. I don't think we were really meeting them. And I think we're starting to do that now. And to me, that's something worth recognizing and acknowledging. I know we have many competing priorities, top of which are, hiring social worker 3s and corrections officers, top of which are preparing for the release of ARPA funding and bringing in proposals that help us really, hopefully, recover from COVID. And at the end of the day, our jobs are naturally difficult. The work involved in our job day to day, that in the absence of COVID, is something that is really grand and deserves our attention. So responding to that as we respond to COVID, but also try to address systemic racism in our systems, makes for a lot of tension. And at the same time, there is so much there's so much opportunity for growth. And I think that's what we're seizing on. So I want to thank each of you for participating. I think we've had some very good discussion today. I know the commitment is there, the work is occurring. I want to thank Adam for staffing us as well and continuing to be a resource. And if there's no further comment, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion? There's a second by Vaughn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right. The meeting's adjourned.